This Hangout on the Air is live.
And we are live. Hi, welcome to IDZ 4?
IDZ Live, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the fourth
one. For those of you who've been here before, you'll understand that it's a fairly ramshackle vehicle, prone to wheels flying off and things going wrong and people salvaging things in the background as I continue to chat. Today, we are once again hosting the show straight out of Hillsborough. We have another format for the show today. As some of you know, we've done 3 of these already, which have actually been very well received, surprisingly enough, Josh. Surprisingly enough.
Indeed.
And people seem to enjoy watching them for some reason, so we're going to do some more. Today, I will hand over to Eric Mantion shortly to tell us what he's up to. But basically, Josh and I are not going to do an awful lot today. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I did want to mention one thing, and that's
yes.
the basics of how one of these IDZ Live broadcasts work. So we're using the Google Hangouts on Air platform, and one of the cool features it has is a Q&A. So we try to think of these IDZ Live broadcasts as an interactive Q&A session. And on the right-hand side, if you don't already see it, you can click a Q&A button and see a list of questions that others have submitted and some that we've sort of preloaded.
Yep.
And you can submit your own questions there. So you can submit a question that you'd like to ask of our guests, or you can upvote an existing question that's there. And as those questions get brought up in the discussion with our guests, we'll mark them as being answered. And here's where the really cool magic comes in. If you're watching this after the fact, you can click on any one of those questions, and it will jump you straight to the point in the video where that topic is being discussed. So it sort of automatically indexes it.
What a time to be alive.
Exactly. It's a magical thing. So that's basically how this works. So if you're watching live or if you're joining us after the fact, please do take a browse through those questions. We think it's kind of nifty. And with that, let's get started.
So we shall hand over to Eric. We've got 50-odd minutes for Josh and I to enjoy the Bob's Beef Queen Early Bird Special. We've got 2 32-ounce T-bones coming. Chris might get some if we get extra greens or whatever. And then it's Daddy Mojo's Late Night Lounge for their pitchers. Sangria, 2 gallons, $10. You can't go wrong. Okay, Eric, let me hand over to you and take it away from there.
All right, thank you very much. So as Keith mentioned, my name is Eric Mantion. I am the community manager for the Intel RealSense community. Also, I go by Nerd Herder because I find that to be a little bit more of an enjoyable title. And today we have 3 wonderful guests that have won previous challenges. And so we have John McGlothlan from the Code Monkeys. We have Justin Link from Promo Sapiens Interactive, and we have Lee Bambers from the Game Creators. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a list of questions, because today, if you haven't heard, if you go to the Intel IDZ Live Facebook page, you'll see it posted at multiple different places. Also in the description below, there's a link to the brand new, just opened today, Intel RealSense App Challenge 2014. And we realized that some people are going to look at that, and it's a little bit like, hey, I really would like to get into that, but it's very similar to, hey, I'd really like to run a marathon. And right after somebody says, I'm going to run a marathon, the very first thing they do is they go Google, how does one train for a marathon? So in that vein, we have a list of questions that we're going to be asking these folks that have already done it, so they can share some experiences and hopefully give you folks some guidance as to how one would get into a new challenge, a new app contest, or whatever it may be, so that hopefully it inspires some of you to get involved. So what we'll do, John, Justin, and Lee, since that's how I see you left to right, we'll just go through some of these questions, and you guys can answer them in that order. For the very first question, and this is a very open-ended one, right, just to get it right, or kick it right off, is if there was one thing that you could recommend to somebody that wants to get into a challenge, what would that one thing be?
I guess for me, the number one thing that we had to be very cautious about is being able to iterate quickly and simply, and always start small first. You always have the grandiose, I want to do everything, and what happens is when you try and do everything, the SDK, because it has so much data to throw at you, you'll get overwhelmed. And so for us at Code Monkeys, we always started very small and stick with something simple like a hand, and then move to head and any of the holy grails, as they would be called.
All right, Justin?
Cool. Yeah, definitely. I can second what John's saying. We kind of ran into that mistake ourselves. But aside from that, I think what I would say, and maybe this is coming from a games perspective, but use assets that are already available, especially with Unity. They have the Unity Asset Store, and it'll save you a ton of time to just go get great-looking assets that already exist as opposed to trying to create everything from scratch. And that was one thing that kind of took us a lot more time, was we had a lot of custom art, which we probably didn't need to have. And so you can get a lot further if you just go and purchase, get $100 and go spend some money on some assets that look great.
Okay. And Mr. Lee?
Yeah, absolutely agree with the previous two. And the previous two pretty much answered what I was going to answer, but I'll say it in a different way. But essentially the same answer. Keep your idea simple and make sure you'll be able to complete it. It's very easy to be ambitious and to plan for this great, wonderful idea that you're going to win the competition with, and you'll get about halfway through, and it'll be a complete mess, and you won't finish it. You've just wasted half the time, and you have to start again and knock something out really quick and rush it out there, and you're not going to win a competition with that. So I would say the advice from me is complete it. That is your objective. But on day one, plan to complete your idea. And just to add a little bit of in addition to this answer, it's if you're going to have an idea and it's going to be simple and something you can complete, make sure it's not like a Me Too idea. You've probably seen the entries from the Perceptual Computing Competition, the previous one. Don't just take one of those ideas and clone it, because you're not going to get the kudos for that. Take the benefits of the new hardware and then think, what is it that I can do with this hardware that I can do? And that's the idea that you should focus on, because it's that that's going to win the competition. So that's my idea, my advice.
I like that. Those were really very helpful. So moving on to the second question, we'll go backwards this time, so that way Lee doesn't have to have all the good answers taken before we get to him. So, in terms of like when I use the analogy of the marathon, right? One of the biggest things I hear is plan out your training. When it comes to developing code, did it help you to try to say, okay, every morning from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. I'm going to code, or did you find it to be just better that hey, you just fit it in whenever you had free time?
Well, I have a day job, which is also programming. But I deliberately created this mental abstraction to say the competition entry is a different job. So I would give myself the weekend. So Monday to Friday, normal, and then I would say Saturday or Saturday and Sunday, that's my perceptual computing, or in this case, the RealSense time. And I don't put any more limits on that. If I get up and start at 10 a.m., I'll just keep coding until I drop. And that gives you some good quality time. Fragmenting it up, you spend half the time trying to learn what you've already done. So you're wasting a lot of time jumping in and out of doing the same project an hour at a time, and the result's not going to be pretty consistent. In fact, you'll find yourself destroying code that used to work because you've forgotten how it used to work. So, big chunks and as much of it as you can get in the time that you've got.
All right, Mr. Justin. Agree, disagree, different?
I'm not sure. We didn't have a job, actually, when my partner and I did the contest, so we kind of had the whole time to do the contest. So I don't know that I can say, trying to divide for free time or not trying to divide for free time is one better than the other, but definitely having a schedule would be important, something that you can stick to, something that, especially when you get kind of into developing, you get kind of hung up and sometimes unmotivated. So I think having something that can kind of bring you back into it is good, and also something to kind of keep you disciplined is probably a good thing as well.
All right, so John, the pressure's on you. So far, we basically have mostly schedules help. You would agree, disagree? You're going to be the one wolf.
I was lucky enough that we had set aside time specifically to work on the project. But I think the biggest thing is not scheduling time, but scheduling what you're going to do during that time. I know that for us here, because the time was limited, knowing exactly what needed to get done in each one of the times slots was important. And so, the old saying, if you don't plan, then you're planning to fail. this is one of those where planning what aspect you're going to try and get done and being realistic on those goals. Back to Lee saying, make it small. You can always expand, but if you make it large, you can't shrink it.
Okay. Similar to the time, in terms of places, we'll start with find that it was best to have something you always did it in the same place as in an office, or again, with the wonders of laptops and ultrabooks, you just code wherever it happens to fit?
I know for me, I coded in the office. It was not something that I would want to code somewhere else because I'd want to be able to be focused, and I know like in a coffee shop or at home, I'd just be distracted. And sometimes the coding can be very esoteric when you're working with where a hand actually is in a RealSense situation.
Okay. Justin?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think it was really useful for us to kind of have our working environment, that's the one you're comfortable with and you're most efficient with. But definitely, especially when you're cranking away at things, it can help to kind of get away from that sometimes. So it's nice to be able to go to a coffee shop or something like that, just to kind of break you creatively,
And Mr. Bamber?
Yeah, I think most of us have a primary location where we'll do most of our development. Usually because everything's surrounding us, and this is where we are, and this is where we work fastest and best and most efficient. But I would add a little codicil to it, which is you're talking about RealSense technology, which means people using your application will be in lots of different places, in lots of different environments, different lighting conditions, things happening in the background. So dedicate at least 20% of your time. Just load it up onto an Ultrabook and then go somewhere else to do your testing. Because you'll be very surprised at how your perfectly running app suddenly completely fails to work as soon as you change rooms or you change a time of day when you're testing your app. So I'd say 80% stay where you're most comfortable, but then give yourself a little bit of time to go out in the field and see what it looks like, and then put somebody else in front of it as well, because you'll be surprised by that too.
That makes sense. So this next question is a little bit more esoteric, and so it's a little bit more open-ended. But were there any things that you would tend to do to get into the zone? Would you crank a certain kind of music, drink a certain kind of drink, get your favorite bobblehead going, a little safety dance, whatever it was that you did? Anything? Any little tricks of the trade, love charms? We'll start with Justin since he's been in the middle of all of it.
I don't know that we had any special tricks. I mean, I guess it was say a little prayer and hope that you actually get something working today.
Okay.
Yeah, that's as best as I can tell.
I like that. That works. John?
I know for me, it's for my development environment actually includes headphones, and I have what my Pandora station, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but it's called Disney Radio. And so the music that gets me into the zone is Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, and Miley Cyrus. I don't know why, but it is.
I'm sure Selena Gomez appreciates the shout out. She's probably watching right now. I'm pretty sure. And Mr. Bamber.
You know what? I didn't think I did anything special until I heard. Yeah, absolutely. Music, definitely. I mean, I'm the sort of a classical person, so I like music without lyrics, because if there's lyrics, then I'm thinking about the meaning of the song rather than the code. But classical, it's nice. It can just stay in the background. It's nice and ambient, and it's quite empowering. In fact, there's been research which says you play classical music to children, and they develop quicker mentally. So I think, as I'm mentally still a child, the classical music continues to be a great source of inspiration. So, yeah, I didn't think I had a special trick, but that would be it. Playing classical music very loud in the background.
We're going to change rock and roll to rock and code. Okay, that works. So this one's a little bit more specific, a little bit more numerical. Again, we kind of did the analogy of running a marathon, right? If somebody's never entered a challenge before, right? They've done their coding and maybe they work on databases or whatever, but they've never entered a challenge. If you had to give a ballpark in terms of roughly how many hours, let's say, you spent on coding versus debugging, just to give people a feeling of the magnitude of work ahead of them. Yes, you're going to enter a challenge and you're going to be devoting this much time. John, what say you?
Man, over the 2 months challenge probably was averaging like 30 hours a week, and at the beginning that was a lot more coding than testing, but then after realizing how much testing was required, I'd say probably about 70% testing and 30% coding after probably the first week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm doing that rough math, at 30 hours a week, 4 weeks a month, basically 2 months, that's something on the order of 2,400 hours.
Yeah, it wasn't a minor thing.
Okay. Lee?
Yes. I had substantially less hours to dedicate to my little creation. So, given my sort of microscopic version of the project, I gave myself an entire week, which really translated as 1 day, because I condensed what would normally be a week to 1 day, for do the prototype. That basically, for those that are still sort of starting out, a prototype is basically all the functionality answered. So you've got some crazy idea, but you don't know how it's going to work. Your prototype will test that, so you've got no grey area, so you can figure out it's going to work. Now I just need to make it look pretty and make sure it runs under lots of different conditions. So I had the bare bones of what I wanted to do. I'd say for everyone out there a week, but I kind of got it done in a day because I didn't have a week. And then the rest of the time I just call polishing and testing, and it all gets lumped into the same thing. Once it sort of works, then it's about making it look good, make sure it works, make sure it's tested, and then that just stretches up until you've got no more time left, and then you just have to wrap it up and then submit it. But that prototype is all important. Don't think you can answer these complicated technical questions later. I'll make it look pretty now, and then eventually I'll get it to work, because that's just the wrong way around. Well, it's the wrong way around for me. So get it working as quickly as possible, get it rounded as quickly as possible, and then spend the rest of the time polishing, debugging. So that's my advice.
And Justin?
Sure, definitely, and I'll kind of add on to what Lee said a little bit. I think an important strategy for us, and one Jesse Schnell has, who Art of Game Design, his book is really good, is that you attack your most difficult problems first. That way you can identify any potential deal breakers right off the bat. It's like, oh, wow, this doesn't work. We need to totally scrap this. And you'll be screwed if you wait till the end to do it. And now all of a sudden, oh, wait, this key feature is broken or we can't use it. And it's funny, actually, because that kind of happened to us. We were relying very heavily on voice recognition in the previous challenge. And I'm sure everybody knows that Lee's nodding his head, I can see. It just wasn't ready for what we wanted to use it for. And we had to pretty much completely change our entire idea halfway through. So definitely I think kind of knocking off your biggest challenges first is important. As far as how I divide my time and how we kind of do it for projects is I like thirds. So the first third is kind of like Lee said, getting that working prototype, that first thing. You got to go from 0 to 1. I do that the first third amount of time, however much you can actually dedicate it to it. The second third is really trying to get an iteration on that first thing that you did, so because all the real magic when you're doing stuff happens when you iterate. So you need some time to kind of test what you did, see what worked, maybe kind of build on some new ideas that you have from that. And then kind of use that. And then the last third is really just, well, there's a whole bunch of crap that I didn't think of. So that's where this is going to go. Some maybe graphic you didn't think you needed, or some tool that you need to develop, or something like that. It always happens. Software development is really complex. So.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that sort of leads us to the next question. And Justin, since we already got you talking, I think you've mentioned this a little bit. Did you do most of the work by yourself? It sounds like you had a partner. There's two ways of looking at that. When you have a partner, you get to split the work, but there's also having to stay in sync with each other. So how did that relationship go about?
Well, yeah, I did work with a partner. Luckily, we had the advantage of working together in the past. We had worked together at the research lab that I was at, and so we kind of already had a workflow too. We used Skype to kind of communicate. And we use SVN to commit our projects and our project files and stuff like that. So we're already able to work together pretty smoothly. But at a certain point, we did need to be together. Especially, I mean, you can only get so far in communicating with somebody through Skype and things like that. So, we kind of had to have some jam sessions. Where he would come over, I'd go over there, whatever, and we'd kind of be cranking it out.
Okay. What about you, Lee? Were you mostly a lone wolf? Batman and Robin, or part of the Justice League? How did you work out?
Yeah, pretty much lone wolf, I'm afraid. It was a sort of a side project. I probably wasn't even supposed to be doing it, but I wanted to do it because I really get a kick out of new age tech. You know, the next thing, something I can cut myself on, and this in particular was really exciting because I always had this idea that computers are going to eventually go in this direction, so we can get rid of the mouse, get rid of the keyboard, get rid of all this crazy peripheral stuff, and we can just start talking to our computer like we would talk to someone in the same room. So yeah, it was basically just me, no artist, no sound guy, no time, to try to create something that could express a little glimpse of what I have as a vision for these technologies. So yeah, just me, myself, and I.
All of your best friends. Okay, makes sense. And John, I got to admit, when I look at you, I immediately think of a member of the Avengers. Was that true, or not quite?
I am a member of Avengers, but for actual like the 1.0 coding, it wasn't an Avenger project, and so I had to do all the. We made a perceptual input class to make it so that we could integrate well with the camera, and so I had a team to work with the input class and past to make things move, but I had to do all the ones and zeros to try and make it so it didn't suck.
So this next one is a little bit more, again, specific. A little bit more on the component that you brought into what was going on in terms of sound effects, right? Obviously, whether you're doing an app or a game, some combination of music or sound effects or whatever you want, because there's an audio aspect to this, and all of you might be proper jam artists for all I know. That's possible, but I don't know. So Lee, how did you work about getting sounds in your game? Did you go have a buddy that jammed on music, or do all your sound effects yourself? How did that go about?
Yeah, sometimes I get a sound guy to create all the stuff custom, but there really was no time on my part. And if anyone's out there who doesn't have a sound guy, doesn't have access to that sort of resource, they can do what I did, which was go to a place called Shockwave Sound, and they actually provide music and sound effects for a very good rate. They're royalty-free. You can use them in your own projects. Very, very reasonable priced. So you can kit out your entire application with all the music you want, all the sounds you want, almost instantly. You can go onto the site, pick all the things you need, get them into WAV format, drop them into your app, and instantly you've got all your audio. It won't be perfectly crafted to the sort of the vision, but really 99 times out of 100, no one really notices the sort of subtlety between something you bought. It's all professional quality stuff. It's just not going to be designed for your particular design, particular application. So yeah, Shockwave Sound kind of did it for me. And any times where I needed to make some changes, I used a variety of. I even use I think it's a very old. It's called SNDREC32.exe. Now, in the latest Windows, they got rid of it, but I kind of resurrected it from an earlier operating system because it's still my most favorite WAV editing tool. So I sort of used that to crop, trim, change volumes, and change the format of the WAV file, and that's all I use. Pretty straightforward stuff.
Okay. And Dustin, I know you mentioned a bit about Unity in terms of pulling some assets in from there. Does sound and music also get in there? How do you go about it?
Yeah, definitely. Well, to answer your question, actually, I'm probably one of the rare cases. I'm a musician myself, and I've also done sound production and that sort of thing. So yeah, I guess I'm that guy. You know, so all the stuff for our game I'd kind of done myself. But definitely in the Unity Asset Store, there's a ton of good packages with audio and stuff like that that you can really take advantage of. And you know, like Lee says, audio is one of the interesting things where you notice it when it's not there, but when it's there, you don't notice it. So it really doesn't matter if the sound doesn't fit 100%, you know, as long as you have something. And then one thing I was going to add also as far as music goes, you know, to try and avoid the royalties, you could go with classical because it's all expired on that anyway, so you can use that for whatever you want to do, as long as the original artist or whoever's performing it, I think. There may be some difficulties with, but classical music I know is used a lot of time for that reason.
Okay. And John, did you go jamming on your harmonica, or how'd you get sound and music in your game and app?
So for us at CodeMon, because we have several people we go to, but the person we like the most as of right now, his name is Seth Stanley. He's been really good for us, and so he's our music guy and sound specialist. And even with old sounds that we had, we give it to him to remaster. And sometimes for a pinch, we use the asset store because it is a really wonderful resource if you just need something quick and dirty.
Okay. Hey, Josh, just to check on how we're going, do we want to reiterate if anyone joined the conversation late, the hangout late, about how to ask questions or bring questions into the discussion?
Sure, we can do that. So if you're watching this live, you'll notice a Q&A link. I'm actually not sure where on the screen, but there's a link that says Q&A that you can click to see the questions that we're discussing, and you can also submit your own or upvote existing questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, about challenges, about coding in general of our wonderful developer guests, please let us have your questions, and we will queue them up, and we'll get Justin and John and Lee to answer them for you.
Okay, awesome. All right, so John, we'll go back to you. There's a saying out there, one of my favorite sayings is, hindsight is 20/20, meaning when you look back, it's obvious what you should have done. And when you look back at it, were there any aspects of what you were doing that, if you got to go back in time and talk to your previous self, you would have said, hey, start on the cover art for your game earlier, or whatever it may have been? Were there things that when you think about it, and we've sort of talked about this a little bit before about hitting the hardest problems first, but were there things that you wish you would have started in parallel maybe earlier?
I guess the biggest thing is making sure the feature set is both doable and understandable. I know that when we first started coding, we didn't quite have an idea where we wanted to go. We just had a rough idea of what would be cool to do, which means we got about a week or two into actual coding, and we didn't actually know what the final project was going to be. And then we kind of had to go back and actually go, okay, so now that we have some code and it looks nice, what is it actually we wanted to make? And so you have to scrap most of the code if you don't have a good sense of how the interaction with the product is going to be with the camera. And that was the biggest thing that I wish when we went back we made a full scope doc of basically what we needed to make instead of just starting to make it.
Okay. What about you, Justin?
It's funny because all we have to do is say the words now, and it sounds like we should have known this from the beginning, but when we originally did our game, we wanted to do something that was a little more A, open world, and B, artificial intelligence reliant, and both of those should have just been red flags from the beginning, because it was one of those things where we got halfway through, like I said, the voice control thing didn't really work out for us, and now we also have all this extra work to do on top of it, and it kind of goes along with what Lee and John were saying earlier, which was you really need to start with something simple, and that was a definitely trial by fire for us.
And Lee?
Yeah, I have a wish to take that time machine and go back and talk to me, but it wasn't really of the competition that I won. It's really to the one that I didn't win. For the one that I won, yes, I'd have gone back and said, look, just get the graphics done a little sooner, because I had like literally 2 hours to make this horrible pile of CRAP into something that looked like it belonged in the shortlist for competition winners. So, and I didn't really have any time to sort of make it look pretty. But there was a project before that where I should really have just left the time machine and clonked me over the head and said, don't even start that project. Which was the idea of doing a teleconferencing application with RealSense. So you'd broadcast your 3D self across the world to like 5 people sitting in a virtual room, and it was like, you don't have any time to do that, so just don't do it in the first place. But for my particular competition, no, I think I got away with it lightly, because the distance between the beginning of the project and the end was so short, there isn't really any regret. There isn't time to have any regret between the 2 posts. So I guess I got away with that one.
Okay. We've sort of talked about this next question a little bit, but I just want to make sure that it's a clear-cut question and we're addressing it. We've talked a little bit about the difference between coding and testing and QA and whatnot. So there's really kind of 2 parts to this question. I'm going to give both parts, and we'll start with Lee. roughly, and I've heard so far we've talked about a 30% coding, 70% testing. But the two parts of the question is, A, how much did you spend on QA and debugging? And the second part of the question is, in any part of that, did you actually hand things over? And Lee, you sort of mentioned this before about different lighting environments, or did you hand it off to some other people so that their faces were being used instead of your lovely massage? How did that break out, both in terms of time and getting other people to help you?
Well, I'd say the prototypey phase, the bit just to get it all sort of running and calibrated and stuff, I think that was about 10 hours to do all that. And then I'd say another 20 hours was getting it polished so it didn't look too... the term is programmer art. It's basically only a programmer would love the application at that stage, really. It's like the ugly puppy. So another 20 hours got it to a state where it kind of looked interesting. I put some video footage in and cleaned up and made the calibration step a bit more helpful. And then maybe the last 2 hours, I grabbed everybody I could find and shoved them in front of the camera and said, I'm not going to tell you how to play it. You figure it out and see if you can enjoy it. And that was right at the very end. Fortunately, everyone sort of figured it out and they understood it, and success. It was sort of the bad idea because if anything went wrong, there was just no time left to do anything about it. So I would probably, if I do it again, bring that in a bit and maybe give myself 2 hours to do that sort of usability testing, and then give myself another 5 hours in case anything went wrong. So that's really how my tiny little project split up in terms of man hours.
What about you, Justin?
Can you ask the question again? Sorry, I was just thinking about some things that you said.
Was, A, if you had to try and do a pie chart or number of hours, whatever you want to do it, in terms of the difference between your coding time and your QA and your testing time, and the second part is, did you do all the QA and testing solo, or did you, I know you had a partner, but did you go outside of you and your partner, like get a significant other or just buddies and whatnot? So, and Lee was kind of saying when you're doing gesture recognition, how intuitive did it feel to them, right?
Right.
Thumbs up sign, did it matter whether it was this way or that way? I mean...
Sure. Well, I mean, definitely, we're constantly testing. I mean, it's one of those things where, okay, I did this thing, test it, okay, yeah, this is working. So sort of once you're getting that in that prototype phase, there's a lot of kind of back and forth while you're developing it. I definitely pulled in a ton of people, pretty much everyone I knew, to come look at it, or anyone who would come over and look at it, and that was a great help. And I did that as early and as often as I could. Just to cut some noise in there, just to try and get as many iterations and work out as many of the bugs as I could. But I think one of my greatest strengths in testing, at least, Miyamoto does this too. He calls it the wife factor, I think. Because basically, I have my girlfriend come in and test it, and if she gets it and she likes it, then I'm probably on the right path for somebody. So that's kind of my approach.
Actually, Justin, so I'm going to pick on you a little bit, because we are talking about RealSense technology at a fundamental, and you had that wonderful full beard going on. So when you went and when you look at some stuff and things like that, do you think it's important to make sure that you bring in different demographics, especially men and women maybe sometimes? How did that work out?
I think you're talking maybe more about facial recognition, right? And how that would work.
Maybe even gesture, right? Like maybe ladies go at certain gestures a different way because of mannerisms and things like that. It's a fairly open question because I hadn't thought about it before.
Sure. I mean, as far as gestures and things like that are concerned, no, we didn't really see any differences between the way men and women used it. More interesting was voice recognition. That was actually a problem for us because a female voice was recognized much differently than a male voice, and sometimes not even at all, actually. In terms of recognition, I haven't really worked with that, but I know in other systems, skin tone has a lot to do with it, and also lighting conditions too. So that would be something to consider.
Okay. Lee, we'll come back to you. John, I think we'll head over to you. We'll start with the QA question, but let's run this other one. We'll also add that on. In terms of your split on QA, I think you said it was a fairly significant amount of time on your QA. And did you bring other people into it as well?
So, yeah.
Sorry, John. My brain slept for a second there, sorry. Carry on.
No worries. I know for us, because there was a lot of significant time to do testing, because what we found out is I got really good at understanding how to use the gestures to move the application forward. And one of the biggest one is actually, you actually brought it up, was thumbs up, is actually very hard to get recognized correctly, because as we found out, this isn't a thumbs up. It has to be like this, which is kind of awkward. And so we were actually lucky to understand that this is actually a lot easier for the system to know, because it's more universal. And we had people in the office that weren't on part of the project that we'd have them actually try and use the system instead of having us actively test constantly. And one of those people, Troy, he does a great job of testing and breaking everything, which was good for us.
That is one of my superpowers, is learning how to break things. I'm very good at QA. And what about genders and or other demographics? Did you find that helped, or was that not something you looked at?
Not something we really looked at. I don't even think that when we were testing that we broke it down by gender. It didn't seem to matter too much for the systems we were using. I don't know. Maybe if we were using more of at the head, that might matter more. I know we were lucky enough to have a wonderful bald person to be able to test with or without hair.
We should all have a wonderful bald person. Lee, do you want to go on the demographics question in terms of genders and or different ethnicities and or apparently hairstyles? Were these things that you had to bring into play when you're doing QA?
I don't know. I didn't have any women to use, so.
We'll retrieve that later.
Yeah, but coming back to the question, the technique that I created didn't actually use the SDK. It drew from the depth data directly, and then I created some stuff which would. It's sort of like a unisex algorithm, really. So it didn't matter who was. It could have been a horse in front of the camera, and the game would have been able to figure out the control system. So I was lucky in that regard that I didn't need any sort of specific detection algorithms.
That's why you asked me to help you with the QA. Okay, that makes more sense now. I wish I had known that ahead of time. All right, so Lee, your next question, if you choose to accept it, is we all would love to think that every time you're going to make an app, everything's going to go perfectly smoothly, no problems, no glitches, but in the real world, obviously that doesn't happen. So were there any good places that you went to get online resources, maybe to code snippets or find out about, I mean, because you're a very experienced programmer, but still everyone has issues. Where did you go for help if you ever had issues?
Well, I was in a fortunate position in that I've been working with Intel on and off, and managed to collect quite a large collection of Intel email addresses. So anytime I need help, I usually know the person who wrote the algorithm. So I kind of cheated, really. So my advice isn't really useful for everyone out there in competition land, but that's certainly how I solved my occasional issues.
We do have forums for those that don't have all the emails in the world accumulated. So we definitely will have, as we get into the challenge, the coding aspect of the challenge, we'll have a full online forum at the Intel Developer Zone devoted strictly to RealSense. So that will be another method for which people can get directly in contact with Intel. So Justin, what about yourself? How did you find help when you needed it? You put up the bat signal or what?
I wish we had a signal that works like that. And honestly, I'm really jealous of Lee because we could have used that too. No, mostly we used the developer forums, the Intel forums, and it was really good for us really to kind of see, is this thing we're experiencing our fault or not? And for the most part, the moderators in there were really quick to respond with some really helpful information. Obviously, there's really not a whole lot of people in there who are going to write the code for you, but like I said, at least you can identify whether it's something on your end or not, and we use the forums mostly for that.
Okay. And John, what say you?
I know for us, we used our personal contacts both at Intel and other challengers to be able to figure out problems. The biggest problem we had for a performance issue, actually, we had to figure out on our own, because according to how you were supposed to use the SDK was not the way we had to use the SDK in order to get a performance that was acceptable for the in-game engine in Unity. But yeah, we from previous challenges and this last one, we have email addresses and phone numbers when if we ever had a really weird issue where, like, so the camera's just not being hooked up. And we'd go through our calls first. So yes, sorry, Justin, that we had extra contacts.
That's so not fair.
Very well. Actually, so on a related question, and for some of you the answer may be no, but did you have any mentors, right? People that were just code gurus that you would in your personal life would go to, and like, how do I do a for next loop, which you probably all know how to do, but just as an example, right? Were there people in your lives that that helped mentor you through what you were doing? Justin, since you seem to be the youngest person, we'll start with you.
The code mentors, probably not so much. You know, I've got some friends who do some development also, and actually, I guess I shouldn't say, I had one of them come over and help me with a bug that I had been banging my head against the wall for about a week for. But no, honestly, I had another mentor though that actually helped us more on the experience design, and that was a kind of cool friend to have, you know, because he had some insights and things that that I think really helped the usability of it, and the visuals too. Also, not so much the code end though. I think we had that covered.
Okay, what about you, Lee? Did you have a Professor Xavier that you would go to for help when you needed it, or?
You see, I don't want to sound big-headed, but I also want to be honest. I don't have any mentors. I had lots of mentors 3 decades ago, but these days I don't have anyone. I don't have anyone to help. But yes, I would say my mentor was an email I sent to someone, I think, in the SDK team, talking about the frame rate that you could get on the depth camera, because up until that point it was just guesswork, or it was just not possible. And it just needed that person to say, yes, it's possible, now go forth. And that's all I needed, just that little hint, just to say, there is a door if you go far enough. So yes, I kind of did have a mentor, but it was a single sentence from one guy.
That sounds more like a code guardian angel than a code mentor of, yes, there's a path, go forth and prosper. Okay, good to know. So every time a code compiles, an angel gets his wings. Is that what you're saying to us?
Yes,
Scott, what about you? Full of mentors, or did you mostly lone wolf or talk to angels? Which option was you?
I would say lone wolf. You know, we had a few angels come down and save us, and it usually involved a restroom. Where
You need to expand on that one a little bit more. Sorry.
I've noticed that, you know, they were saying before, it's like, well, we would go to a coffee shop. Well, I don't really have time to go walk to a coffee shop. And so usually during restroom breaks, when you're sitting down, the idea comes to you of actually how to fix the problem, because you're not staring at the problem, and it makes it so that you'll be surprised how many times a 15-minute restroom break will change everything perspective-wise, for not just perceptual, but any programming that you're trying to do.
15 minutes. Maybe eat a few more bread muffins. I'm just throwing it out there. Okay. So, you know, one thing I think, you know, and now we kind of go back to the analogy I started this all off with a marathon, right? Is obviously a marathon is 26.2 miles. That's not a short distance. I think probably most people say, hey, step one before running a marathon is go run a 5K, go run a 10K, right? Work your way up to this. If we have some folks out there that either see this live or maybe catch it later on, if they're in, say, their sophomore year of college and they're just learning how to code or whatnot, is there any sort of guidance as to, you know, before one should enter a challenge, you should maybe be fully graduated from college. Maybe you should be fully graduated from college and have 5 years of experience. Maybe you should be working in coding for 30 years like Lee. Is there any guidance, you know, that be reasonable in our expectation that, you know, you should have this kind of background, this kind of experience under your belt before one enters a challenge? We'll start with you, John.
I don't think that experience denotes success, I would actually believe not years in college or years in the field, but actual confidence in yourself is probably more important. I know that there are brilliant programmers that have never actually been taught how to program because they want to be self-taught, and so they take the time to go through all the tutorials of how to do C# or C++. And do I think 30 years in the field helps? Yes, but I don't think that is the end all for winning a challenge. Having an interesting concept and being able to execute that concept is the more important, and only yourself can judge if you can execute a concept or not. I know for me, experience was hugely important, but I don't believe experience is the end all of the situation.
Okay, what about you, Justin? Since you clearly have, what, 50 or 60 years of coding background behind you, was that critical to your success, or is it okay to start a little younger than that?
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, experience is a double-edged sword, right? You learn all of the things, and you get sort of in this habit, and you're more efficient with experience, but you sort of tend to kind of block yourself out a lot of times doing the same things that you know already work, and so a lot of times you can miss some of the more obvious ideas because you're going to the one that you're more experienced with. But you know, no, I don't think that you need experience at all. In fact, you know, some of the first things that I did were just kind of pulling pieces of tutorials together and just making something work. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters, is just making it work, you know. So if you can do that and it looks good enough on the other end, then I think you've been successful. And you've got a good idea too, obviously.
So, Justin, just to pick on you a little bit, if you don't mind me being a little personal here on my question, about how many years of coding did you have under your belt before you started your first challenge?
Well, the challenge was last year, so I had been programming for games maybe 2 or 3 years, but I didn't have any real formal training for it. I went to school for web design and development, and then sort of transitioned to it through some internships and projects that I got the opportunity to work on. So I guess I'd probably say 2 or 3 years.
Okay, and I'm sorry for picking on you, but I love that story, because I do think that, you know, that we do have all kinds of people that will be at least thinking about the challenge, but they're still in school, or they're just started coding, like you said, 1 or 2 years ago, and you know, it doesn't take 30 years of coding experience to win a challenge. You're clear evidence and proof of that. So I appreciate you being willing to be honest about your youth and experiences there. So Lee, since you are not necessarily quite in the same framework, what would you say?
Yeah, I don't think you would need any previous experience. I think you've got a good idea, and you've got willing, and you've got the right tools in front of you. You could learn programming as you're creating your application for this challenge. It's not rocket science to program. It just requires willpower, really, to stick at it. When I was back in the day, one former life, I was a lecturer, and we used to teach people how to program and create a game within 12 weeks. And each class was 1 hour long. So that's 12 hours from not knowing anything to being able to create your own application, which was a pretty decent application as well. Sprites, movements, sound, music, all that kind of thing. So I reckon, you know, you put the right network behind you, some mentors, someone to be able to help you, lots of advice, resources on the internet, nice set of tools to actually get the thing done really quick. And yes, you could hit this without any experience, without any knowledge of programming, and you can create something. And it's amazing. And it's exactly what Justin was saying. Sometimes experience can be a handicap, because you're going to approach it exactly the same way. And so the ideas are going to kind of come from this stable of everything that came before. So you're building on the shoulders of giants. Someone who doesn't know that they can fail, you know, someone who doesn't know that what they're doing is terrible, they can actually produce something absolutely unique that just blows everybody away. And that's the kind of idea that can win a competition. So, yeah, I think even if you can't program, find the tool, start learning it, keep your idea simple, and then create something. Complete it, and then submit it to the challenge. Absolutely, go for it.
It is definitely worth noting that the airplane was invented by bicycle mechanics, right? So these guys didn't have any degrees in aerospace engineering, and they invented the airplane. So I think that's a great point. Kind of expanding on that a little bit, Lee, since you brought it up, and we'll go back to you, Lee, since you're the one that sort of brought it up. Are there things that you would suggest in terms of online tutorials? I know I've used Code Academy myself. I think that's very good. There's Khan Academies out there as well. But are there places online that you think, hey, if you've never coded, because I will mention this, and it's a little bit of an advertising, so I will apologize ahead of time, but the challenge, this year's Intel RealSense App Challenge is a two-part situation, right? Phase 1 is just ideation. It's just coming up with the idea. If you can come up with a great idea, you can move on to Phase 2. You don't have to submit a line of code. If you can write an email, maybe add a picture or two just to help explain your idea, you can be a finalist into Phase 2 by getting through Phase 1. So the question to you, Lee, is are there great places online, tutorials or whatnot, that you'd recommend somebody that's never coded before but wants to get in?
Absolutely. Bit of a loaded question for me because my company develops game creation tools, so I can just But the one, just keep it simple. The app that I won the competition with was created in a language called Basic Professional, which is based on BASIC. So it's the language that was developed to teach people how to program. I wouldn't say it's the easiest programming language in the world, but it's one of the easiest programming languages to learn. But I'll say that and then I'll stop, because 98% of the world's population is now using Unity. And they use Unity because it's very easy to get into, and it already has RealSense integration. And it's free. So it really is, big wide open gate if you wanted to get started very quickly. But if you wanted to get your hands really dirty and learn programming and create something, then you can't get very far with. You can get very far with that Basic Professional. As to general resources, you only have to go onto Google and type out programming, and then you'll get 15 pages which just tell you all the starting, the fundamentals, loops, variables, all that kind of thing. And then if you want information specifically on RealSense, the best thing to do is get the SDK, because inside there are a lot of samples, and they break the samples down to the tiny little bite-sized chunks of learning. And so if you want to know about voice recognition, there's a tiny little sample for that. If you want to know about depth or gesture reading, another little sample about that. So that's the place you go if you want to know something specific about RealSense. You don't have to go to the forums or try and dig it out from the infinite world of Google. It's actually all in the SDK. So between those three things, you should have everything you need to get started and knock an app out. Okay, what about you, Lee? Justin, any great websites or tutorial sites or whatever else you want to call it, YouTube video makers that you think would be great if somebody wants to get into the world of coding? They should maybe consider these things.
I don't know if I could comment on the world of coding, but I could probably comment more on developing inside of Unity, because that's mostly what I've done as far as programming's concerned. Definitely Unity Answers, the Unity forums, I access those all the time. The Walker Brothers Studios, I think they have some really good ones for Unity specifically. There's another one that I'm not thinking of right now that's also really good, and I wish I could tell you. It kind of sucks, but and definitely, like Lee says, the documentation that comes with RealSense is really good. I mean, honestly, you could take some of the tutorial packages or whatever the examples that come included with it, and you could get some really cool stuff working just from that. So just kind of look at that, break it down, see how it works, place it in, and then modify it, add on top of it. Okay. And John, what about you?
I know for me, whenever I have a problem, I end up using Bing. I know a lot of people like Google, but I found that for strange technical questions with errors, Bing has actually been better for me. And I agree with Lee. The first place to start with the challenge is actually in the SDK, into tutorials, because they also have working code, so you can see this code compiles to this object, and this is how it interacts with the camera. And that makes it a lot simpler with understanding what you need to do to make it work. And obviously, as a Unity shop, it's really nice that you can just drag, drop, and go for the initial development.
Okay. All right, so we're coming up to the top of the hour, so just to recap a little bit, I'm going to do a quick recap and then give you each a few minutes to give us a final word. But some of the big theories and themes I heard here is, one, and I'm going to use Pac-Man as an example, right? It's far better to do the first maze, make sure it works, get some fundamental framing of art in there, and then once you get that all working pretty well, then worry about making a second, third, fourth map, right? So get something working first, and then expand from there. I think you all pretty much also like the idea of using some of the other assets that are available, whether it's through the Unity Asset Store or the other places that you guys have shared where you can grab maybe some music or sound effects. And the other thing is that you will spend a significant amount of time actually working on testing and QA and things like that when you compare it to your coding. So we'll start off in the order that we started these things off with. John, you'll go first and give us any parting thoughts or any last words, maybe even words of encouragement for the friends that are going to be trying this out here.
I would say that RealSense may seem like a very difficult project to work on, but the Intel SDK I've actually found has been very straightforward when you're trying to use it. I mean, integrating with Unity in the way we want specifically can be difficult, but you know, as we said before, if you bite off something small first, it will be something that will be rewarding because you'll feel like you're moving forward quicker than if you try and bite off something huge.
I like it. I like it. Justin.
So this would be my advice, I guess, if I had to give one piece of advice. You really have to look at this like a contest. And as much, and I may get into trouble for saying this, I don't know, but and as much as you can kind of get caught up in what's the coolest idea that I can think of that might change the world or something like that, at the end of the day, what Intel is really looking for, I think, and obviously I can't speak for them, is something that looks really cool that uses their technology. So if you've got those two things together, I think that you've got something that they'll be more interested in, as opposed to, you know, maybe try to solve the world's biggest telepresence problems or something like that. You know, you can get caught up that way as a programmer, and I can definitely relate with that.
Okay, good advice. Lee, what would you say?
I would say play to your strengths. So you're going to be good at one thing. So Justin, for example, he's got a big background in sound. So trying to combine the RealSense technology with sound, you're going to end up with a phenomenal result because you're passionate about it and you've got a lot of strength in depth there. If your talent is graphics, use the graphics to sort of bring that out, bring that technology out. My particular talent is mad scientist, crazy inverted ideas. So what I produce will be something completely off the wall and upside down and inside out. But it just might be interesting enough that it wins the occasional competition. So find out what your strength is, and then you combine that with the technology and take all the lessons that we've been talking about this last hour and go out and complete an application and submit it. So that's my advice.
All right, so I would like to take this opportunity to thank Lee Bamber from the Game Creators, Justin Link from the Chronosapien Interactive, and John McGlothlan from Code Monkeys for participating today. It was great having you guys. I really appreciate you sharing your tips. Again, my name is Eric Mantion. I am the community manager for the Intel RealSense. And Keith, I'll kick it back to you to close us out.
All right, thanks, Eric. That was really good. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Josh?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It was great. Good job, everyone.
Yeah, good advice there. Some good advice. If anybody's wondering what the noise was, I actually took the initiative to upgrade on our double up for $1. So we actually got 64-ounce T-bones delivered from Bob's Beef Queen, where Portland's elite get their meat, apparently. Anyway, Justin's looking slightly unnerved there. Anyway, if you want to find out anything else, software.intel.com. Thanks very much for everybody today. We've got next broadcast we're going out with Luke Grabluski, I believe, on the 13th. But we'll send you some details out on that before. Until then, have a great time. Josh, nice to see you. And
always a pleasure, never a chore.
Always a pleasure, never ever a chore. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys. That was really good. Cheers, Eric. Speak to you soon. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.